To the Howie Silbiger Show on the True Talk Radio Network. Get in on the conversation. Call 1-877-669-1292.
And good afternoon. Welcome to the Howie Silbiger Show right here on the True Talk Radio Network. My name is Howie Silbiger, and we are live, which means that you could call in. Numbers to call in everywhere, actually, everywhere. It's 1-877-669-1292. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. It's been a crazy week. Between local stuff, between international stuff, it's been an absolutely insane week. And because this week has been so insane, I felt that it would be appropriate. It would be very, very appropriate to bring in a guest, an expert who could kind of make sense of some of what's been happening, and kind of give us an indication of what we could expect in the next couple of weeks. He is an expert. He is an expert in security and an expert in politics. He is my political guru, as I like to call him. Our political guru. His name is Ryan Morrow, and he is the director of the Clarion Project. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's actually the Clarion Intelligence Network, so that my boss doesn't get mad at me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Section of Clarion Project.
I'm sorry. It used to be the Clarion Project, right?
It's Clarion Project, but I have my own section within Clarion Project.
Okay. So it's the Clarion Intelligence Network. That's what it says on the screen. That's what I really should have read, but, you know.
Who reads?
Come on. It's overrated. Yeah. Ryan, we were watching Wednesday was an insane day in the United States of America. The idea that normal people could go crazy and run from a mostly peaceful protest. I love using that term because that's the term that was used all summer when they were burning down cities across the states. To go from a mostly peaceful protest to storming the Capitol building seems a little insane. How does something like that happen? I mean, this didn't just come out of nowhere. There has to be some kind of background to this.
Yeah, without wanting to sound overly philosophical, it always starts off with moral relativism. What was right and wrong becomes blurred because, hey, I really want to do something, or I really don't like the person, or I don't like what's happening. It always kind of starts there. If you stick to like what's right and wrong, and you know you're not going to cross into the wrong line, or at least you're going to avoid it as much as possible, you'll avoid radicalization. But it starts really with blurring that, but then it crosses into hysteria. Usually some type of belief in a global conspiracy, and that varies in some way. But all extremist groups have this idea that there's like a hidden puppet master, whether it's QAnon or the Islamists or Antifa saying that everyone's like a closet white supremacist, or the white supremacists saying the Jews are behind everything. It's always some version of that. And as you get into that, if you start believing everything's a global conspiracy or that everything's being puppeteered by someone, you naturally go into an echo chamber that you trust because you don't believe the media, the military, books, the media, like every source gets disqualified in your mind. So where do? You go to that specific message board on Reddit that you like, or that specific author, and it takes on this cultish gang-like philosophy. And that's when what is normally unbelievable suddenly becomes believable. And that's common to extremists across the board. And then you just kind of fill in those mental parking spots with the different variables to your liking. If you're a racist, you fill it in with some of that anti-Semitic propaganda. If you're someone who hates Democrats, you fill it in with some anti-Democrat memes. If you hate Republicans, you fill it with some anti-Republican memes. And that idea of hysteria, that we're on the edge of the apocalypse and you have the power to stop it, this is your moment in history, is what culminates in what you saw. And if you're thinking at this point, well, that's totally deranged and separate from me, not really. Most of these people are relatively normal when it starts. And I've got news for you. All of us, including me, have in some way contributed to this hyper-partisan, very inflammatory political environment. If we're honest with ourselves, we've all contributed to it.
Now, I'm seeing right now on the left, I'm seeing people like Michael Moore. I don't know if you saw his tweet today, where he was calling.
Do I even want to know? Ugh.
Yeah, he was calling it an inside job and saying that there were congressmen and senators from the Republican Party that were actually leading protesters through the building, and that this is all true, and that and that Trump and these senators and congressmen all set this whole thing up, and the whole idea was to usurp the government and to overthrow the Congress. I mean, it was a pretty long tweet. It was a pretty long. Well, he put up on Twitter. It wasn't really a tweet. It was like one of these long diatribes. So when the Democrats and the left are complaining that the rhetoric on the right side was dangerous and hateful and incited riots and violence, wouldn't talk like this do the exact same thing on the left?
Yes, I remember Michael Moore back in the days when he was supporting the Iraqi terrorists killing our forces. So not much credibility in my mind, but he does have a big audience. And what he doesn't realize that while at the same time he's, in some cases rightly, lambasting Republican leaders for inciting this environment and the attack specifically. But what's he doing? He's doing the exact same thing. Because if you're saying that certain members of Congress led the attack, you're saying they're terrorists. Now, how do you treat terrorists?
Right.
A lot of people are going to say you beat them up, you arrest them,
Or you shoot them.
or you shoot them. So it's not a big jump to assume someone who trusts Michael Moore acts upon those words and does the exact same thing that he's condemning. He's an idiot. He lacks self-awareness. It's just stunning to me.
It was shocking when I read it this afternoon. It was shocking. Somebody posted. I have a Facebook group, the Howie Silbiger Show group, and somebody posted up there, and I read it 3 times. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I had just finished watching like 2 hours of CNN because I like to watch CNN and then Fox. I like to get like all the sides of the issue. And hearing hate fest on one side and hate fest on the other side is kind of fun too.
Right.
So I had just finished watching 2 hours of CNN where they were lambasting Trump and lambasting a couple of different senators and congressmen, saying that they were fully responsible for this insurgence and that they should be tried for sedition. I mean, it was an all-out assault on the Republicans. And then I opened up my group, and there's this message from Michael Moore actually expressing the exact same sentiment that they're accusing the Republicans of expressing. And I'm like, what hypocrisy. Because nobody's going to condemn Michael Moore for this.
Oh, of course not. He's a darling right now. And it's just amazing to me how this all flips. Like, you just switch the characters involved in the story. Antifa, mostly peaceful protests, punch Nazis. Oh, it's somehow different. It's not different. The war that might have been sparked, and I use that word specifically because you might see a nationwide insurgency, not a civil war necessarily, but like you might see attacks in all 50 states over the next couple of weeks. I'm just being honest with you. It's not between us and the right-wing extremists or us against the left-wing extremists. Like, it's against really all the extremists. And they are, I hate the terms right wing and left wing in this context because Antifa are anarchist communists who talk about basically killing the Democratic Party leaders. They're not Democrats. And the white supremacists, and there was a heavy white supremacist element involved in this specific attack. Not everybody in that rally, but in the attack itself that initially, breached and went in, heavy white supremacist element. Those people aren't reflective of the Republicans who they've openly said that they want to kill. It's all of us against them. And I hope that people understand that really patriotic truth because we have a lot of ground to stand together on right now. We're actually, everyone says we're more divided than ever. Not really. We are actually more united than ever at this moment. I don't know about ever, but ever in recent history, I think. As for the white supremacist element, just so people know that that's not hyperbole, if you look at the people who are being identified that were, in the heavy combat gear and really leading that attack, it's clear that they went there with a plan in place. It wasn't like a spontaneous riot. They went there with an operation. And the people that are being identified, Nick Fuentes, who's an anti-Semite, the guy from the Traditionalist Workers Party is pro-Hezbollah, pro-Putin, white supremacist. Other people being identified, like that guy with the zip ties, connected to neo-Nazi type groups. There's radical Oath Keepers elements. So it's becoming more and more clear this was a coalition of anti-government extremists, QAnon type extremists, and white supremacists. And that's important because of the Benghazi comparison in my mind. I mean, you know, the Obama administration was like, oh, well, that was a protest that got out of control and everyone mocked them. There's a lot of people describing that like that today. There is some truth that, in my opinion, that President Trump incited that, but the white supremacist elements that wanted to make that happen had that in mind before Trump said anything that day of the rally.
Now, the idea that Trump is a white supremacist has been floated around for years already, dating back to the misquote from the Charlottesville press conference, and that was purely a misquote. I mean, it was an intentional misquote, but it was a misquote. They cut out the end of the sentence. And I love when media does that because I see it a lot where Trump will say something and they'll lob off the end of the sentence. For instance, on Wednesday, at his speech on Wednesday, he says, "Now let's march down to the Capitol Hill. Now let's peacefully march down to Capitol Hill." And somehow the word "peacefully" had disappeared in all the clips, which I think is fascinating. That people would go out of their way to edit out key words that change the context of a sentence. Is actually in media, but to alter it to such an extent and to play a narrative that Trump is a white supremacist, which I thought was ridiculous from day one. But it's a narrative that's played out and a narrative that many millions of people believe.
See, again, that comes down to the destruction of nuance in our political environment, I think. Like, it's one thing to say you think he's weak on the issue of white supremacism, or his language attracts white supremacists. I don't think it's a conscious thing, but the fact is that there's a lot of white supremacists who hate him, by the way. I know because my team monitors these guys online, so I speak with some authority on this. A lot of them hate him. A lot of them liked him at first and started hating him. There's some who are somewhat pro him, not really 100%. And then there are some 100% pro-Trump extremists who aren't white supremacists. So there's some variety in there. But to say that makes him a white supremacist is ridiculous. There's a big gap between criticizing someone because you feel that their conduct assists an extremist cause versus saying they themselves are consciously a white supremacist. I will say, though, that I think the stand by and stand back comment, especially in the light of recent days, increasingly creepy to me.
Now, do you
Doesn't
think
make him a white supremacist?
Do you think that was? Do you think he said that intentionally, or do you think he was just so frustrated with that stupid question that they kept asking him? I mean, every time he got up at any press conference for 2 years, that's all they asked him was, "Do you condemn white supremacy?" And every time he said, "I condemn white supremacy. I condemn the KKK," and I mean, you could find 100 videos of him saying, "I condemn white supremacy. I condemn the KKK," and then they kept bringing the question up, and then they brought it up at the debate. Do you think he just said that out of annoyance, just like more of a piss off kind of answer, rather than a serious stand back and stand down? I don't think he was seriously telling these people that to stand by and and wait for orders. I don't think that was his intention there.
It was an odd answer. Is the problem is that it wasn't a natural, like when you're annoyed, you might say, give someone the finger or say that's ridiculous, or I've said it a million times. Stand back, stand by. It's just odd. It strikes me as purposeful, as reflecting some sort of thought process. Now, there's some analysis regard there, so I wouldn't say I'm 100% sure of that. But I can't escape from that, especially in light of what happened in DC and his lack of reaction, watching it on TV for like hours and not tweeting when seriously his tweet could have saved lives and he knew it.
Yeah.
And I have to put those two things together. They're just important data points that are just so related that I have to feel there's a connection there.
Even though his kids and his grandkids are Jewish?
Oh, it's not because he's a white supremacist. I don't think he was saying, oh, white supremacists stand by. I think he was thinking in his mind, the people that Joe Biden, whoever, are calling extremists in this question are my people. Not thinking, oh, they're white supremacists.
Right.
And so he's saying, stand back, stand by, because I don't know who Proud Boys are. I think he genuinely didn't know who they are. But he's thinking, I don't know who they are. I don't want to condemn them, but they're saying they're on my side. So I'm going to say stand back, stand by, rather than just outright condemning them. It was just, there was some thought process that gave that odd answer.
My theory for years has been that since the passing of the Patriot Act after 9/11, America shifted their focus from white supremacy and homegrown terrorists to Muslim terrorists and the infiltration of Muslims, allowing white supremacist groups to grow and to recruit. Look, before that, they were pretty much dead. I mean, after Ruby Ridge and after all the raids that ATF did on the white supremacy groups, they were pretty much dead in the water. And then 9/11 happened, and suddenly the focus was shifted from homegrown terrorists and from white supremacists to Muslim terrorists, and the white supremacists were kind of left out in the cold. They were ignored, relatively ignored by the intelligence community, who had focused most, I think, the majority of their resources on Islamic terrorism. Do you think we're starting to see the results of those decisions 20 years later?
My assumption is yes, but I must say, in my interaction with the intelligence community and the law enforcement since 2002, there did remain a pretty significant focus on white supremacists, anti-government extremists. It was brought up all the time. I think it was easier to stop them. A smaller number of them who were radicalized would be willing to actually take action because they wanted to live to see tomorrow, whereas the Islamists want to die. So it becomes a lot harder to combat that. And the Islamists, in some ways, were easier to go after because a lot of them weren't American citizens or they were just residents. They stick out because they just stick out in a community where you have full of native-born, that they stand out more. And Americans would know, oh, the word jihad is probably a bad indication of their intent if someone said it. So they became easier to spot, easier to get the approval for surveillance and investigations, easier to arrest. And so you saw a lot more activity publicly around that threat, whereas the white supremacist threat was still there and growing, but you hear less of it because they're less likely to do something and the arrests of them are less likely to make news. So I think some of that had to do with perception. So they didn't go off the radar, like I'm hearing a lot of people say. But could more have been done? I would say yes, because of the international component to white supremacism, because these aren't just, they're born in America and homegrown that way, but they still have international connections, just like a homegrown Islamic radical, a guy born here. If he's loyal to Al-Qaeda, that's like an international connection. It's not an American thing. So I would say that more action was certainly needed on that. The political leadership needed to be more aware and sensitive about this problem and really how their language contributes. And that especially includes the left, not just the right, because all these extremists feed off of each other. So if you're soft on Antifa, you might think you're being tough on white supremacists, but really you're giving them a big Christmas present.
Right. How different is Antifa from, let's say, the white supremacist groups? I mean, radical groups.
In my mind, they're not.
Radical groups are radical groups, and
the tactics are the same. They're both revolutionary. They both want to overthrow the U.S. government. They hate both political parties. They're bigoted in different ways, but they're still bigoted. They mirror each other. It's astonishing to me that I see this debate where some people defend one and condemn the other, and there's like a debate about which is worse. Like, screw them all. They are all enemies of the United States. Openly, you don't have to debate it. And you have to, in order to defeat one, you've got to take on them and the Islamists and all of them. It's a very frustrating debate.
How big are these groups? Are there a lot of people involved?
Unfortunately, yes. And both Antifa and the white supremacists and the really paranoid anti-government militia types, law enforcement, and other groups that monitor these guys, no one can keep up with it. Sometimes you're finding the bad guy by luck of a draw. You have a pile of suspects that's growing every single day, and you're kind of just picking out which ones you want to go after. Or you glance at 10 of the 1,000 and you say, all right, I think these 10 look like they're the biggest threat, so let me invest my time that way. We are overmatched right now. The radicalization process is speeding up in multiple ways, both in terms of number and the degree to which people who are already radical are jumping towards acting on violent intentions. Both of those things are accelerating very, very quickly. And it scares living daylights out of me. Be prepared the next 2 weeks, and also be aware of your patriotic duty to report anyone contributing to this stuff. And don't contribute to the environment. Kindness has to rule again. It sounds corny, but seriously, that's like the common denominator to all of this. It's just the proliferation of hate and tribalism and just lack of kindness.
So with the Trump years behind us now, and Trump's quite light touch onto on these kind of groups, do you think anything's going to change in a Biden-Harris administration when it comes to crushing these kind of groups?
Yes, I think you're going to see some big changes actually, and on the positive side, I think you're going to see probably an incremental crackdown on the anti-government militias that are really extreme. I'm not talking about your grandfathers who are like getting together to shoot guns and they call themselves a militia in case something bad were to happen. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the really organized types that seem to be craving the day that they can engage in violence and always saying martial law is around the corner. Let's prepare for war. And you can tell that they kind of want it to happen. In fact, I think some of that crackdown actually is already underway. I must say, under the Trump administration, you have seen an increase in prosecutions and investigations of white supremacists, particularly after the plot to kill the governor of Michigan. But leading up to that as well, the Trump administration was the first to designate a white supremacist group overseas as a foreign terrorist organization. They were there a long time. The Obama administration didn't designate them and sanction them. The Trump administration did. I still think it took them too long, but nonetheless, they were the first to do it, and they didn't have to do it. So they deserve credit on that level. Under Biden, I think you'll see, a tougher approach on white supremacy, and that's partially forced by events, so that's naturally going to happen. I'm concerned about the approach on Antifa. The Antifa operatives that we monitor, they want to go to war with Biden. To them, that's going to prove their authenticity. So they're not foot soldiers of the Democratic Party. They're saying they want to prove that they are not by going to war with Biden. How he handles that, if it's appeasement, then you're going to see Antifa's ranks double overnight. If he confronts them, you're going to see their ranks cut down significantly. So that's going to be a really important moment to wait for. In the realm of Islamist extremism, I'm concerned about because we saw what happened under the Obama administration where you had Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas-linked groups being consulted with. I don't want to say being protected, but there was a lax policy on them. And that's bad from the perspective of countering Islamic terror as well as white supremacy terror that sees that and then uses that to recruit. So I'm envisioning a mixed bag. I'm hoping that unlike the Obama administration, that if they bring in Muslim Brotherhood linked groups and their politicians start really working with them and having them advise them on policy, that when that gets called out, they'll hear it and change course. But I'm also trying to be optimistic.
Now, these groups, do they actually pay attention to what's going on in government? I mean, are they cognizant of the changes and the nuances of government and the nuances of different leadership? Or are they just...
Nuances, absolutely not. Like for the so-called right-wing extremists, I just hate right-wing, left-wing, but the right-wing extremists, like they'll point to a single Jew in the Department of Homeland Security and say, see, the Jews run the Department of Homeland Security. If you look at on, forums like Reddit, or there's still Instagram pages that are like white supremacist friendly. It's a game of spot the Jew. Like where they literally, you'd look at a news article, they try to identify people with Jewish sounding last names, and they highlight them, and then that's their post, as if they're doing like genius investigative work. So no, there's not going to be nuance from these guys, but they do pay attention to the news. They are obsessed with the news. It kind of becomes their world. It becomes what they and their online friends, because a lot of them don't have friends in real life, are talking about. So their form of socializing is... Is the world getting more dangerous or less dangerous? Because we keep hearing that
that now that the Democrats are there, they're going to save the world. The Messiah has arrived. But
Right.
but is that the truth? Is that really going to happen?
No, because I mean, I was actually saying in recent years that I felt that things were getting safer. And there were some bad trends, but overall the good trends were outweighing the bad trends. Right now, I am more optimistic about the Middle East than I am about the United States.
Wow,
And that's saying something.
seriously.
Uh, so, yeah, I'm really terrified. And I, like a lot of other people, really did say that what happened in DC was kind of going to happen. That there would be an attack on the government by these types of extremists because they're openly talking about it. It didn't involve any genius on my part. But if you pay attention to stuff, like we knew this was coming months ahead of time, which is why I'm so stunned at the lack of security at that event. Just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, why do you think that was? That they didn't have enough security? I know that when last time I was in Washington, was right after that guy tried jumping over the fence to the White House to get at Trump. So the guy climbed the fence, he jumped over the fence, and they put barriers up in front of the fence.
Right.
So they had a 5-foot buffer zone between the fence and the public, with barriers separating the area. And I was there with a group of people, and I stepped into the buffer zone. I was taking a picture or something. I stepped into the buffer zone, and Secret Service was on me almost immediately. I mean, it took less than 30 seconds, and I had 5 Secret Service guys there pushing me away and questioning me on why I was behind the buffer, why I was in the buffer zone. So I said, if security was that tight around the White House for the simple crime of a guy jumping over. Here you have 100,000 people standing in the street, and they're yelling, this election was stolen from us. Let's go to the Congress. I mean, you figure security would be pretty tight, no?
Yeah. I mean, it's worse than the mistakes that led to 9/11. Not because I'm saying this event's on par with 9/11, but the stupidity is just that mind-boggling. At least in 9/11, there was some stupidity and lack of foresight, but there were bureaucratic problems. Like there's nothing you can blame it on except for just sheer ignorance and stupidity. They could have made one phone call to me months ago and been like, "Hey, what's a day or a time period that you're concerned about?" And I'd be like, I would say the month or a few weeks leading up to Biden's inauguration, like anyone else would have said. There's no words. I mean, it's just unbelievable that happened. Yeah, I wish I had a better, more substantive answer, but it's just that it's that bad. It's just that bad of a mistake.
It's completely mind-boggling. I was watching it live, and I was just like, where's the National Guard? Where's security? I mean, within a block of the Capitol, you have 5 police forces within a block of the Capitol building. You have the FBI, you have the CIA, you have you have the ATF guys. I mean, they're all within a block. One simple phone call. I mean, all of them could have come down to the Capitol building immediately with their SWAT teams. They all have separate SWAT teams. I mean, it could have been easy to clear out that building within 15 minutes of them walking in. Yet the whole thing lasted like 5 hours. So I just don't get it.
I know.
It's just so weird.
It's hard to have confidence in anything after that. It should have been the most predictable thing in the universe.
Yeah.
Even the intelligence flow. I mean, I know some of those white supremacists that were involved in there. I've reported them to law enforcement, as I'm sure other people have. So you know that there was intel that these guys were headed to DC to do something. Like, how could there be minimal security like that? It is just unbelievable to me. And the consequences of this, I don't know why some people are minimizing this, and they don't get how close we came to a true disaster. I mean, that was an emergency and it was a disaster, but I mean, like, congressmen and senators just being massacred because these people came with weapons. A lot of them apparently had training, you would assume, based on their ideology, openly saying they were going to execute these guys. And you see the one video where the black cop is facing down some of these people, and man, is he brave. He's getting faced by this crowd of people, and you're noticing he's not fighting. He's actually not striking them. He's also not retreating. And it's kind of a weird video when you first watch it. And now people have looked at it, And he was very bravely and intelligently keeping the confrontation going, but walking backwards to lead them towards the stairs away from the doors into where the senators were.
Right. He led them all the way up the stairs. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were right there at the door.
Yeah.
Like right there. And they followed him because people just follow the person that's in front of them. And it worked. So the position that we're in right now, as scary as it is, like we were that close to it being many, many times worse. You might have had live executions on TV.
Wow, that would have been crazy. I mean,
Crazy
that would have been
became
third world country crazy, not America crazy. Third world country crazy. This stuff happens in banana republics. Doesn't happen in the United States.
We're kind of in third world crazy right now. I hate to tell you.
Yeah,
this is stuff that shouldn't be happening in America, but like just even a few years ago, like probably wouldn't be possible. And what's really frightening is that when you look at the different white supremacist and extremist groups that were involved, because again, this wasn't just like a random collection of weirdos. They came from across the country. Now, many extremists wouldn't go to DC because they lack the money, they couldn't get off from work, maybe too lazy, or were worried that they would get caught because it's just such a predictable thing. If I'm an extremist wanting to do something real bad, and like that's not where I would go, especially if I thought that I was being tailed. So what are the networks back in these people's home states going to do over the next couple of weeks? That's scary. And what we're seeing from the intelligence that we're getting and what we're monitoring is that there's memes and ads going around about rallies in state capitals, all 50 states, in the days leading up to Biden becoming president. So everyone needs to pay attention to where rallies are happening in state capitals, and pay attention to your Facebook friends and whatever, and see who's involved and see if there's evidence that they're planning something, because this could be really bad.
Yeah, seriously, it's kind of scary. Now, now, what about the censorship that we're starting to see against conservatives, conservatives in general, not only high-profile conservatives, but conservatives in general? It seems like Facebook, Twitter, and by extension Instagram and Periscope and all the other side companies that these companies own have been shutting down hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conservative members' profiles, pages, or accounts. I don't think I've seen this kind of censorship in America ever before. Do these companies have too much power to control the dialogue? Too much power to control the narrative? Or do you think that they're justified in shutting this stuff down?
My initial impulse to this stuff is always to say, well, let a business do what they want, and then a better competitor will come on and conquer them. But these companies are arguably utilities at this point. I mean, they're part of people's daily lives. You have very little influence over them. It's almost like, the power company. Yeah, I guess you could, these are essential services, essentially, for operating, for businesses and stuff. So I think some regulation is certainly necessary. I understand why Twitter did what they did, because if you're sitting there and you're worried about even being sued or just, bad PR, if the president says something in this type of environment, intentionally or unintentionally, it can get people killed with the way things are right now. And Trump isn't always careful with his words and his tweets.
But it seems kind of hypocritical, if I could use that word, when they allow Khomeini out of Iran to be tweeting about annihilating the Zionist state, and that seems to be okay, but it's not okay for Trump to tweet that the election was stolen from him. So I'm kind of torn between watching Twitter get rid of American conservative voices, but allowing dictators to still air their grievances against their imaginary grievances against other diplomatic countries that they want to kill. So it just seems kind of hypocritical to me, and kind of one-sided, and maybe a little.
Oh, it is. I mean, they think about how eventually they got good at it, shutting down the ISIS guys on Twitter. I used to, for fun, talk to ISIS on Twitter.
Right.
And obviously I've reported to law enforcement and stuff, but it was fun for me to, be immature and mess with them and have them mess with me back, calling me an a-hole and different things like that. Like that is partially how I dealt with the stress of the threat. But they justifiably said, look, we're at war with these guys. Let's crush their accounts. And it was effective. Just like bombing radio stations and lines of communication when you're at war with the enemy makes sense. You say, well, at that point, freedom of speech doesn't matter because we're at war with this group. You arguably are at war with the Iranian regime. That's obviously what I think. The terrorist groups that they sponsor, yet somehow they're doing things only marginally different in style from ISIS, and they somehow have free reign. And then you shut down the president of the United States. Now, to be clear, I wouldn't shut down Trump from Twitter. I'm just saying I understand the predicament. Just think a little bit. Like what I would have done if I was that concerned, I'm at Twitter, is say, all right, people who are putting out tweets like that, including the president, we're not going to censor you, but there's going to be a delay. And it's going to come through a filter. And if there's something inciting violence, we're not going to allow it to be posted. Now, people would still be upset at that, but I understand in a certain environment, a certain context, if you feel like you have to do something, that makes more sense than saying we're going to take away your voice. And by the way, cancel culture and doing things like that, big gift to the extremist cause. Don't think that you're hurting the extremist cause by doing that, because their narrative that to spur themselves to action is say your freedom is being taken away. We're now at that point where there's no coming back unless you engage in violence. And they always talked about the white supremacists, the type of people that carried out that attack in DC. Soon you're not going to have a voice on the internet. They're going to take that all away. And the reason I say this is because there's a lot of truth to it. And now that this happens, Parler goes down, which I may not be a fan of, but still, you take down Parler, you take down the president and other people from Twitter, their prophecies are coming true. You just helped radicalize them. And you further pushed them into an echo chamber. So they're not on Twitter and Facebook where other people can challenge their ideas or where people like me can spot them more easily. They're going to go into their own encrypted chats. It just got a lot worse. There's going to be a Parler competitor or something else, whatever it is, a smaller communication cell that becomes larger, much more difficult to detect and monitor. This wasn't good for national security. It wasn't good for Twitter. It wasn't good for anything. It just has very poorly thought out, and it's dangerous for all of us, the precedent that it sets. So I'm really quite upset about it.
So why do you think they did it? I'm sure the great minds at Twitter and at Facebook could analyze the situation the same way you did. Why do you think they did it? I mean, they built these billion-dollar companies, so I mean, they're not dummies. These people have a little bit of brains. I wouldn't say a lot of brains, but a little bit of brains. They had to have seen that this is not good for them, not good for the country, not good for anything. Why do you think they went about and did this?
My guess is that there wasn't a lot of brainstorming into it, because I actually haven't, this idea of delaying tweets from certain people for review, I haven't seen that idea out there. To me, it seems like common sense. It didn't involve a lot of thought on my part, but I haven't seen that idea out there. So it's very possible that just like how the lack of security in DC is so stupid it doesn't make any sense, I wouldn't put it past Twitter and the tech giants to do something stupid that doesn't make a lot of sense when really you could have come up with an alternative idea. So I wouldn't put that past them, but also, of course, there's a pretext. I mean, there are a lot of left-wingers out there that cancel culture is a way of implementing Antifa's goals. I mean, Antifa wants to make it impossible for conservatives to operate in civil society. And doing things like this is a goal of Antifa, to pressure companies to make it impossible for you to exercise your freedoms. That their own manuals talk about things like this. So I think there's an ideological element, somewhat of a pretext. So it's really all of that. And never underestimate the, I don't want to say, keep saying stupidity, but all right, whatever, we'll say stupidity, I'm looking for a better word, of the left. I mean, in terms of messaging and strategy, and I'm not talking as a right-winger, I'm politically independent who votes for both parties, but I think any objective observer would have to look at the left and say, their messaging and strategy is so terrible that it's hard to fathom. Think of politically the position they're in, right? Like this rare moment where almost everyone's criticizing Trump. The optics are terrible. Everyone's concerned about a threat. They've been, to their credit, warning about the rise of white supremacism and this type of extremism, and things like the type of dialogue and tweets that we do get from leaders like Trump that's increasingly inflammatory. Like, they couldn't have had a better moment politically. You would think they would say to themselves, keep the attention on this. It's working for us. We want to solve these problems. And then what do? Well, Twitter shuts down Trump. Parler gets, basically destroyed. And now everyone's talking about that. It's just unbelievable to me. Like that no one thought to themselves and said, just even politically, this is self-damaging and one of the dumbest things that we could do right now. And there they did it.
Yeah, and I put the Democratic Party into that category too. Throwing out the idea of impeaching a president 11 days before the end of the presidency seems a little ridiculous to me. Just to me, it seems a little ridiculous. Knowing the process of going through impeachment, we've seen the process. We saw it last year, the first time they impeached this president, right? So looking at that process, in 11 days, it seems a little odd, especially since the Senate said, "Look, we're not prepared to hear it until the 19th." So impeaching the president after the fact, it's kind of dumb. So why put yourself through? Why put yourself through these optics?
Law. Yeah, I'm not enough of a constitutional law scholar to know apparently there's some plan to speed this through, but I can't tell you whether it's constitutional or not or how that's going to play out. For me, I must say, and I know I'm going to get backlash for this, but I owe it to people to be as truthful as possible and not pander. If it was me, I would vote to impeach for inciting the insurrection and for particularly the response after it started, because you can make the argument he didn't intend for it to happen. I still kind of doubt that that's the truth, but you can make the argument, and you don't want to, punish someone unless you're positive that that's the case. But after it happened and he's reportedly watching TV and there was plenty of time to respond and he didn't, and reportedly still hasn't talked to Pence, didn't check in on his safety. There's enough there that for me, if I was in Congress, I would feel morally compelled to impeach, even if it wouldn't result in a conviction or anything like that.
But do you think there's a point in
they shouldn't get people's hopes up that hey, this is going to happen and result in a conviction?
Look,
because like you said, we have no time.
Dan Crenshaw was on one of the networks, and he made an excellent point. His point was that politicians are responsible. It wasn't only Trump responsible for this. Politicians in general are responsible for this. They keep making these promises and these crazy promises to the population that they know they can't keep. He says so. Trump was making this promise that Pence would overturn the results and the election was stolen from him, and that the election results would be overturned. So naturally, you're going to have people who are upset about that, who are going to take it out in some ways. Some people are a little crazier than others, and when they get a little upset, they take it out different ways than normal people do. And he says, and now the Democrats are doing the exact same thing, saying we're going to impeach Trump 11 days before the presidency ends, and they know they can't do it. It's not going to happen. The Senate is not going to impeach Trump before, and they're not going to remove him from office before the end of his presidency. So building up these expectations puts the blame on the shoulders of the politicians, as well as the person who's inciting. Let's say Trump was guilty of inciting and pushing the crazies to go and do what they did. But the whole concept, the whole atmosphere of politicians making these crazy promises, and this has happened throughout the entire Trump administration, both on the right and the left, that they've made these insane promises that they knew would never happen. Politically, it was impossible for it to happen, but they made the promises anyway, building up the hopes of people who were a little desperate, who whatever, and then radically disappointing them, causing this kind of violence, this kind of upset. I thought that was an excellent point.
It's excellent. I could see where if you're a totally self-absorbed politician, you're thinking, well, at the end of the day, they have to choose me or the other guy, and I just need to be able to make the point that the reason I couldn't fulfill the promise is because the other guy's party. If you're a total immoral person, I can see where you could justify that. But what happens is that builds that anger. It does fuel the extremism, because then people start saying, well, the system must be failing. Maybe the system is wrong. All these extremists have an idea in mind for replacing the government, replacing the idea of America. They're not pro-American, they're anti-American. even some of those that claim to be patriotic, they actually aren't, because they're talking about reshaping it, breaking up America into a white America, some of them, or bring it back to, in their mind, the glory days from hundreds of years ago. You're talking about destroying America as we know it.
Right.
And a lot of that comes from repeated disappointment and saying, well, the system obviously doesn't work, so I need to find a new ideology. And so when you make these false promises, when a politician does that and you fail to fulfill them, you're fueling that idea that the system has failed, it's time to move on and replace what we believe in with something new. So it really is very dangerous. Maybe you have a better answer to a question in my mind than I have, because I don't know the mechanics of the Republican Party leadership. But is there a way to censure Trump? Because I feel like it would even be healthy for the Republican Party to say they at least gave him a slap on the wrist.
Well,
I was
of course.
reading about how the Arizona Republican Party apparently wants to censure Cindy McCain. So, come on.
Look, the Senate and the Congress have the right to censure. They don't have to impeach. They could censure the president.
And what about the Republican Party, though?
The Republican Party, of course, could do it too. The GOP could censure any of their members. So each party has the right to censure, but the Congress itself and the Senate itself has the right to censure. So if they don't like something the president did or something the president said, they have the right to slap the president on the wrist and say, hey, listen, what you did wasn't completely impeachable. We can't prove impeachment on this, but you're a bad boy, right? They could do that. They choose not to with Trump because they want to hold a heavy stick with Trump, but that's the possibility. Look, Obama was censured by Congress, and Clinton
by a Republican-led Congress.
That's right. And Clinton was censured before he was impeached. He was censured. So I mean, there's a precedent of Congress and the Senate doing that. This Congress and this Senate, this past Congress and the past Senate, not the new one, the old ones, chose not to deal with Trump that way. And maybe it's because of Trump's unconventional way of dealing with politics, or maybe it's because they just hated him so much that that everything had to be extremist. But this was the way they decided to treat Trump.
Do you think the Republican Party should do that? Like, especially if they control the Senate, I think it would be important for the Republicans to say that
we disagreed with that.
Something in response to this,
Yeah, I mean, not everything requires the removal of the president. So even the president's phone call that he got impeached on last year, I don't think that required the removal of the president. They could have said, "Look, that was an unethical thing that you did, and shame on you." And look, now it's on your official record that you did this, and we censured you for it. But to go through an official impeachment, I mean, that should be reserved for major crimes, like stuff that's just inexcusable altogether. I mean, you look at it and you're just disgusted by what the guy did. So that's really what impeachment should be, and I think that's what impeachment was originally intended for.
And you have to have a reasonable chance of conviction. Otherwise,
right.
you're taking time that could go to something else. So for me, like, even if I'm supporting impeachment, but I'm not going to, I might support morally, but I wouldn't support taking that action if there's no chance of it working, because there's only so much time in the day and there's a lot of people hurting for different reasons.
Right. And the Senate will be tied up for weeks and weeks and weeks dealing with the impeachment trial, as they were tied up for almost 2 months dealing with the impeachment trial last year, which means that they weren't passing legislation and doing stuff to help the American people. So everything got put on hold.
That was another really dumb, strategic mistake. And with messaging, it's just, I mean, you go on and on where I know some people, and I'm saying this as an independent, but like a lot of my conservative friends sometimes will like to play up that the left is so good at messaging and strategy to excuse their own shortcomings. I got news for you. No, they're they're really unbelievably terrible with strategy and messaging. Like, don't say that they play the game better than you, because they do not.
We got a Facebook message from Dino. Dino says, "What is happening in the U.S. as concerns the lack of freedom of expression is incredibly frightening. That the Ayatollah and the Communist Party of China can remain uncensored on Twitter, and the President of the United States is banned and is absolutely ludicrous and dangerous." I have to agree with him. I think he's 100% right.
Yeah, did you see the tweet where the Chinese Communist regime embassy in the United States put out a tweet describing their concentration camps of Muslims
Yeah.
as basically re-education classes for women's rights.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't see any of those markings that Twitter puts on saying like, "Oh, this is disputed or not confirmed."
It's amazing. It's amazing. But everything that Trump tweeted or posted that was disputed, or it's absolutely crazy.
Whitewashing concentration camps somehow gets through the filter.
Yeah, that's fine. Mass murder is A-okay with Twitter.
Yeah.
It's so ludicrous, and I think I'm starting to see. I mean, I didn't see it before because I really didn't care all that much about these major tech companies. They were useful. Look, we're broadcasting not only on my own personal stream, but we're also broadcasting on Facebook and on Twitter and on all these these mega sites, right? So I always used them as a tool. I never really looked at their influence on anything. It was just a tool to get the message out to everybody. So this was an easy way to broadcast to to a few hundred people who watch on Facebook, the few thousand people who watch on Twitter. It's just a tool to build audience. In my mind, that's what Facebook and Twitter and everything was. I never put anything personal on here. I never do anything personal on any social media. It's all about the show and all about the politics and all about having the discussion. And then I started this Facebook group, the Howie Silbiger Show group, and it was basically to have political discussions. I didn't want to do it on my personal page anymore. I moved all the politics over to the group, and some of the people on my personal page were getting a little annoyed with constant fighting on the page, so we moved it on to a group, and went into the group, and I started noticing suddenly that Facebook was starting to send me messages. This article that was posted by this member is factually incorrect, or this article that was posted by this member is fake news, or this is this, and I started looking at it. I would go to each post because I was curious. It was more a curiosity thing. I don't care if I erased a post; it doesn't matter to me. Like, erase it, who cares, right?
Right.
But I went to the post to see what they were marking as not factual, and some of them were opinion pieces. And I'm thinking, wait a second. You're fact checking opinions? How does that work? How do you fact check opinions? and they were opinion pieces, or they were news articles from like legitimate news sources, like Associated Press. And I'd be like, okay, you're fact checking Associated Press, but Associated Press is the fact checkers. So the Associated Press is saying that they were wrong. I was just so totally confused by it.
And they made such a mistake. All these social media, by ever entering the area of like, hey, we're a publisher responsible for the content. Like, if I'm making a phone call to someone and I'm using Verizon's not responsible for the content of my phone call or my text message, my group text, or any of that. And that's understood. Social media is like the modern version of that. And somehow, just through pressure, and I thought the pressure was misplaced, saying, oh, well, they need to start editing stuff. No. I'm kind of understand if you report a post, maybe taking it down, but even then I could see a strong argument saying not to. It's just right. Like, they're not responsible for that. If someone wants to have a fact checker for their posts, a company like AP can make a lot of money by selling an app or something that then interacts with your posts and can rate them or screen them or whatever. But instead, Facebook and Twitter and all these places decided to act like newspaper editors, and now it's a different ball game. They're open to now different regulation as a publisher versus just being a platform, right, or like a utility. Just a tremendous mistake, and the damage it's done is incalculable.
No, I kind of miss the old Facebook, where where I could post something or somebody could post something, and then suddenly and then we could have an honest political debate about it. We could talk about it, and we could discuss the issue. I mean, we could disagree with each other, but we could actually have a conversation. You can't have political conversations anymore anywhere. It's impossible
the big
to have
sinful thing that both Twitter and Facebook also did, and all these measures they're taking to fight extremism pale in comparison to this mistake that they did, that they can reverse, and they are not, right, which is the algorithms that spit back at you more of what you like. Like, I loved Facebook, where I would go on there, and I don't know who posted 3 minutes before me. It might be some kid from high school, and that's how I kept tabs on lots of people without actually having to talk to them, but I still felt like I had a relationship there because it was just kind of random, you know. That was it. And then over time, as those algorithms got smarter and smarter, it started spitting back. So you start seeing the same 10 people over and over again. Now you apply that to news. Now you have an extremist echo chamber because if you start liking all of one type of post, it spits it back at you. And I've seen extremist propaganda spread that way. So you start liking, this is an extreme example, ISIS material. All of a sudden, Facebook's now recommending and pushing ISIS material towards you. And you start doing the work for them. That's how the algorithm works. And it is a threat to our society from national security, mental health, the health of our civil society. If there's one thing I would do to help fix this country, I would ban these places from having that algorithm because it poisons us on so many different levels.
Yeah, I agree with you. I remember years ago, before Google bought YouTube, I was at a trade show, and I ran into a guy, and his job was to put the videos on the front page of YouTube. So when you went to YouTube and they had all those videos on the front page, there was actually a guy employed. He chose the videos on YouTube that was going to go on that front page. It was one guy. In the entire YouTube, there was one man who chose what you were going to, what everybody was going to see when they got to the YouTube.
Man in the world.
Seriously, and his job, of course, was replaced by an algorithm, right? But now, even YouTube, they all work the same way. Exactly what you're saying, the algorithm. I went onto YouTube. Somebody recommended some video, it was some conspiracy video about 9/11, and he says you're going to love this conspiracy. I mean, you're going to think it's ridiculous, but you're going to love the thought process behind this conspiracy theory. So go and take a look at this one. And I went and I watched this. I don't know, it's an hour documentary, a half-hour documentary, whatever it was. I watched it, and then suddenly, YouTube is throwing all these conspiracies at me. And every time I go to YouTube, half my YouTube recommendations are conspiracies about all sorts of weird things, and I'm like, really? Like, I'm not really interested in watching this YouTube, but there they are, right?
Now, what if you bought into it? Look what you just did. If you weren't who you are, you would have been radicalized by that.
Seriously.
Thank you, YouTube.
Yeah. So is that how radicalization actually happens, by the way?
That's a huge part.
Really?
That's like, it's one of the most critical parts. Yeah.
Wow. You would never think that would be a major part of it. You figure when you think about radicalization, you figure, oh, my friend is a Ku Klux Klan member, so he's going to invite me into the Ku Klux Klan, kind of like the Freemasons, right? Come and join the Ku Klux Klan, and that's how I'd get into it.
That's part of it, but now let's say you have a bunch of friends who are in the KKK, and you're on Facebook. They recommend friends and contacts for you now.
Wow.
So now they just put together your own KKK club.
Amazing. Amazing. So I hope that that the American government is successful in deregulating or changing the regulations for these companies, because I think it's time. Yeah. I think it's time they're held accountable for what they're doing.
Yeah, and they do it for profit. By the way, I'm convinced that someone's had to have told them at some point that this is like a key part of the radicalization process. They don't care. They don't care. They make too much money off of this.
Right, of course. You and me are the product.
Yes.
They give us their site for free, but you and me are the product. Amazing. Ryan, thank you. That hour went by pretty quick.
It did. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. And I don't have you on half as much as I should, and it's just laziness on my part. So so I'm going to invite you back, and I hope that you'll agree to come back, and we can do this again, and follow, like, maybe in a week or two we'll do this again and see how things have changed in the States.
I'm sure there'll be enough bloodshed to warrant another.
Yeah, as we get closer to the inauguration, see how much death and destruction has happened across the states. I hate to sound morbid, but I mean, unfortunately, there's a serious chance of that happening, and that's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to take a little break. When we come back, Sheldon Eric Freed will be joining me right here on the Howie Silbiger Show on the True Talk Radio Network. Thank you, Ryan, for being here, and we'll take a little break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Howie Silbiger Show right here on the True Talk Radio Network. My name is Howie Silbiger. The lines are always open at 1-877-669-1292. That's 1-877-669-1292. Joining me now is my friend, my producer, and online contributor, and of course the host of the newest show on True Talk Radio, Inside the Vault, Sheldon Eric. And if I hit the right button, I might actually get Sheldon right here on with me. So I have to hit the right button. So here we go. Let's try that again. let's
Hi, Howie.
Let's try that again. Here is Sheldon. Hey, Sheldon Eric Freed.
I'm fine. How are you?
I am good, thank you. Well, it's buttons, Sheldon. I have to learn the buttons.
It starts.
I have to learn how to use the buttons properly, Sheldon.
It's at the beginning and then at the end when sometimes you flub things up. English is not your first language.
Well, that's the
but
way
in
life,
reality it is.
That's the way life is, Sheldon.
Yes, it is.
That's the way life is. We just gotta have to accept it. I'm good. I'm good. Under house arrest, but good.
Under house arrest is right, eh? It's so strange. You don't see a peep, nothing outside my window at 8 p.m. And even yesterday I saw a few police cars just patrolling, but nothing. It looked like a deserted ghost town.
Well, we're under house arrest. That's what happens when people are under arrest.
You would never think it would happen in your own backyard, eh? You would never think it would happen in your own backyard.
Sheldon, I never committed a crime, and that's the whole problem with this whole thing.
It's almost like we all committed a crime, and like you said, we're all under house arrest. We can't go out.
I don't know what crime I committed, but I'm stuck in the house. And,
it's the same. Yeah, I know. It's the same thing that goes with me too.
I have to be honest though, because I don't think I go out much after 8 p.m. anyway. but that's just. But I always had the option to.
Sure.
And not having the option to bothers me.
Well, we always have the flexibility, even if you wanted to take a walk on a beautiful evening. If the weather was nice, you wanted to take a bit of a walk, go out, clear your head. But then you realize you can't go out and clear your head at night, or
you can't do anything.
You can't have friends coming over. You can't go over to a friend's house. You can't go over to family's house. It's like, wow. I mean, I really hope that these vaccines will come in so quickly, and hopefully, like anybody else, we'd love to get things back to normal, that we could be able to go out, be with friends, be with family.
But Sheldon, even if the vaccine comes out tomorrow, let's be honest, even if we all get vaccinated tomorrow, do you think these regulations are going to back off? Do you think the government's going to give up the power they have over us, the control they have over us?
Well, if they didn't, for the people who would feel nervous about it now, I think there would be almost like mayhem. I think there would be protests like, galore, because then all the conspiracy, if anybody had those feelings, and if what you say is true, and I'm not saying it's not or it is, but I'm saying if what you're saying is true, then yes, people are really going to revolt back against the government, and it's not going to be a very happy sight. I really
think that the government enjoys having this control over the population. I think that they're doing what they think is proper and what they think they have to do in order to stop this disease. But I think they're enjoying it at the same time.
But also they know that they have to get people back at work. I mean, people are losing their jobs right, left, and center. People have to go to work. The kids have to go back to school because both the mental well-being. I mean, there's so many problems now, reading articles day in and day out from the various newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, London, the London paper, and the mental anguish that this has caused people, especially people that are living alone or people have very limited contact, is absolutely staggering. I mean, God knows how many people, unfortunately, have committed suicides because they just couldn't handle. Like, this is, as the word comes up, unprecedented, which keeps coming up regularly. And I know I brought up that word.
But is it really unprecedented?
Well, no government, I pity any government leader anywhere around the world that had to do what they do for whatever the reasons were, because nobody would have ever expected this to happen. Although I'm not surprised in terms of the virus of COVID-19, and who knows if there's not going to be more viruses out there, and I'm actually surprised that they weren't, especially the magnitude that we're facing now. So it's really scary for everybody. I mean, for people talking about it all the time, like you and I've talked about it many times during the show, it's a very scary process, that to the point that, you know, when people are with family and they're together with other people on a regular basis, the impact is severe enough. But people that are alone, especially seniors that are living alone, it's devastating. It's absolutely unbelievable. And then you feel like you're a prisoner in your own home.
No, we are prisoners in our own home.
And
I can't go out right now to take out the garbage.
I know.
It's illegal for me to walk to the corner to take the garbage out, Sheldon.
Yeah. And who knows? I've even heard people saying that Kijiji is now selling dogs or renting out dogs for people to walk their dogs so they can be able to get out, because that's one of the exceptions of our local curfews, is you are allowed to walk a dog.
Wow.
So, like, could you just imagine? Like, who would have ever thought?
Seriously.
Yeah, you could walk your dog. So go on Kijiji, get a dog, or go to the SPCA, adopt a pet, and then take them out for a walk, and the police can't do anything as long as you're within 1 kilometer of your house.
Completely insane, Sheldon.
It is insane. I mean, it's like, this whole thing is barbaric. I mean, even people, could you just imagine, Howie, that even if people were working at home, let's say they finish at 5 o'clock or 5:30, the curfew's at 8 o'clock. So let's say you have to go and get a grocery order. You imagine what the grocery stores are going to be packed to the rafters? The overcrowding, because they have to shut down by the latest 7:30. So their employees, their people that do the stock, need to have time to get home. Like, can you imagine? Like,
and I don't understand, Sheldon. One thing I don't understand about this whole thing is that we have to shelter in place. Basically, that's what we're doing. And we're told even during the day we shouldn't be going out. We should be staying at home. Workers have to work from home, office workers. And if you don't have to go out, you shouldn't be going out, is what the government told us.
Yep.
And at night, and at night you're not allowed going out. And yet schools are still open. So
I've had debates about this from everybody.
All
and they said,
this work and all this talk about protecting everybody, and everybody has to stay home and everybody has to follow the rules, and then you're going to open the schools and the kids are going to go into school and then bring it home, right? So I mean, what is the point of all this if we don't shut down the airports and we don't shut down the schools and we don't shut down the borders, not allowing people to come in from outside provinces, outside countries? If we don't do that, then what is the point of all this, Sheldon? What are we doing?
This is what I never understood from the get-go. When they closed the border to non-essential travel between certain areas, certain provinces had that at one point, and of course Canada and the United States had that you cannot cross the border by ground. But then people are flying to the States. People went away for holidays. I know sometimes you go away to Florida, and you decided not to go this year because obviously of safety. The same thing with my significant other and myself. We wanted to go away. We chose not to because of safety, and we didn't want to run the risk of, if God forbid, if we contracted COVID, what would be like in a place that we would want to go.
Right.
And
Makes sense.
And then look how many politicians, Howie. This is the biggest bunch of BS I've ever seen. Look how many politicians traveled, non-essential travel, non-governmental mandated travel. There was at least 6 politicians across the board in various parties, provincial, federal parties. They're supposed to set an example for you and I not to travel.
Why does this surprise you, Sheldon?
It doesn't surprise me. That's the whole point.
Why would you be surprised?
I'm not surprised, and I know neither are you. But then we both ask ourselves, they're supposed to set examples for the citizens. To reiterate, I'm not surprised. And you know what? The only reason that they apologized
because they were caught.
Because they got caught. If they didn't get caught, they would have had a wonderful quote of Bill Medley, Jennifer Warren's tune. I had the time of my life.
Yeah, but you know,
Going down the beaches of Barbados or going down to Hawaii or wherever they went,
but
that was fine and dandy. That was good for them.
even
Meanwhile,
though they were caught, Sheldon, they
yeah,
didn't care. I mean, you look at a guy like Pierre Arcand, who said, "I'm not resigning. I mean, I know I did this. I'm not resigning. Why would I resign?" Right? I mean,
yeah, but he got demoted.
big deal.
Yeah, I
Big
mean, he
deal.
got them. I mean, he got. Yeah, I mean,
So he
he
got
shouldn't have.
demoted. He got demoted this week, and next week they'll just they'll bring him back up. I mean, come on.
And he had no. I mean, even if he got demoted, like you said, big deal. I mean, the fact is, politicians are supposed to lead by example.
They don't lead
They
by
did.
example. It's
They
do what I
and they
say.
obviously
It's
they
do what I
didn't.
say. Don't do what I do.
Yeah, exactly. So of course you and I are really upset because you and I can't travel. You and I are listening. You and I are staying home. You and I are being safe. And people like us that have decided, even many snowbirds have decided to stay home this year, brave the cold weather. Some of them are elderly that would usually go to Florida for 4 to 6 months. They decided to stay home. Yes, you had a handful of snowbirds that did go away. Now, usually our local airports here get over hundreds of thousands of people that go away for Christmas holidays that are crowded the gates and the terminals and everything, ready to depart on faraway destinations into warm sunny belts. And then you get 12,000 people that were going. And then I saw local news pictures and videos of people lined up at our local airports at Pearson, at Trudeau, at Vancouver International Airport. They weren't even if they were wearing masks, they were not social distancing. They were doing everything possible. Now, if you were a person that went away traveling, now you're really going to have a big problem because now you have to get a negative test results with no more than 72 hours prior to you boarding the plane. Otherwise, you can't get back to Canada.
Right, but you think people care? They'll just stay where they are.
They'll stay where they are, and that's what they're going to wind up doing. And a lot of people, which really got my goat, Howie, was people decided that instead of them waiting for the vaccine here, they decided to go to the States to try to get vaccinated there.
And
which
why would that get
apparently
your goat, Sheldon?
What's that?
Why would that get your goat?
Well, because
Why
of
would
the
you care?
fact that they ignored the government directives to stay here. And the thing is, let's say they get COVID in the United States.
They have to pay for it.
Yeah, but don't you think that already the United States is even worse off than we are? And the thing is that they have enough problems with hospitalizations.
Why do you think the
and now foreigners are going into their country?
Do you think the HMOs are going to care that they make tens of thousands of dollars more because some foreigner got COVID in the States? They're going to be very happy about it.
But again, it might be the fact that the hospitals might decide to take the American people first, and then foreigners after.
Well, no, that's the chance you take when you go to a foreign country.
Exactly. So the thing is, you have things in your own backyard that you can get as a Canadian citizen, and they choose to ignore it, and they're not even guaranteed that they're going to get it faster there than they will here. There's no guarantees.
They're getting it faster, Sheldon. They're getting it faster. People are making appointments. They're having appointments next week for their vaccines. Florida's pushing out the vaccine.
Well, I guess with the amount of snowbirds, I guess Florida's doing the proper thing considering. But the thing is, I guess maybe they're thanking the snowbirds for still investing in thousands of dollars in tourism money. But you know what? It's really it's just a crying shame that people still, regardless, decided to ignore and decided to say, well, it's warmer in Florida, we'll take our chances.
Right.
So I mean that's the thing too. I mean, look, you and I would have gotten. I mean, you would have gone away because I know you usually go away in the winter. I would go away this year. My significant other and I were planning to go away for the holidays, and we said no because there was just too many cases, and we didn't want to get stranded, and then not having to come back, and then she would have to come back. We didn't know if the schools were going to open up at the time, so we decided, it's. Let's stay home. Let's be safe. We're following the government directives. We do not want to take a chance with our lives, and we do not want to take a chance with the people surrounding us, or come in contact, or whatever, friends, family, whatever. We don't want to take a chance, and we don't want to give strangers, if we contracted the virus, I don't want to give it to somebody else. Why? Because I care. I care about people, and I care about staying safe. and not giving COVID-19, if I do, God forbid, wind up getting it, I don't want to give it to anybody else. So I listen to the government.
I don't blame you. I do.
You listen to the government. A lot of snowbirds have listened to the government, but there were a lot of selfish people that didn't care.
And but that's the case in anything, though, Sheldon.
Yeah,
think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing when we had the demonstrations.
Hey, look, last night there was a demonstration opposing the curfew. And
why are we not surprised?
And there were multiple demonstrations across town opposing the curfew. And the demonstrations opposing the curfew were mostly attended by people not wearing masks. Now, I know outside that you're not really required to wear a mask when you're outside, as long as you're maintaining social distancing. But they were not maintaining social distancing. They were standing outside, and they were not wearing masks. So when you talk about selfish people and people who don't care about the safety and the welfare and the health of other people, I guess these are the people you're talking about, right?
Yep, exactly. I mean, the thing is, if people wore masks and do social distancing, that's fine. But what happens if more people wind up getting sick?
That's a good question. Yeah.
See, so that's the thing. Also, which really got my goat, and I know we're going to get into this topic also. When it comes to any demonstrations, and you and I've had this talk many times. We had this talk when the thing happened with George, when the really unfortunate police brutality on George Floyd happened, and there was massive demonstrations, and then there was out and out thuggery where businesses got lambasted with Molotov cocktails, and cars were looted, set on fire, and people were hurt that had nothing to do with what happened with George Floyd. It was the average citizen. And it breaks and then when I hear what happened of the storm of protesters, thugs, that stormed one of the most democratic countries and principles of the world, the United States Capitol, it just absolutely, regardless if they were Democrats, Republicans, I don't care who it was, because that means absolutely nothing for people to go in. And already some people died needlessly. The people that were in the Capitol building that was trying to formalize Joe Biden's presidency had to duck for cover, Republicans and Democrats alike. And I basically said, and you and I've talked about it too, when Trump got elected, he got elected based on the principles of democracy, which is what you and I have always staunchly believed in, staunchly agreed on, and we have staunchly talked about on this show. The democratic principles of having an election fair and square. Trump got elected fair and square. Okay, now Trump has not been reelected. It's Joe Biden under the Electoral College votes. They were going to ratify it, and next thing you know, windows were smashed, and people were carrying all different types of weapons, and they were scaring people from inside, both Democrats and Republicans. Now that, to me, that really, I mean, if you want to be against the election, that's one thing. You want to protest, that's one thing. When you start doing damage and threatening people's lives, that's another story, and that has to stop.
Well, the precedent for that was set last summer when there were riots in the streets and businesses were being burned down, as you mentioned before.
Exactly.
And nobody got up to stop them. So it's
and
good
that's what's wrong. And they should have been stopped.
Well, I disagree with the attack on the Capitol building, and I think
sure.
I think it was a heinous attack.
It was terrible.
I disagree with the attacks on regular citizens that happened all summer. I think those were heinous attacks too.
Yep.
And I put them in the same category of heinous attacks. And had the government cracked down on the people in the summer, then maybe people on Wednesday wouldn't have felt as entitled to be doing what they were doing. Yep. I mean, I'm not saying that, had they cracked down on the riots in the summertime, that this wouldn't have happened on Wednesday. It might have happened anyway. But the people who committed this crime on Wednesday seemed to feel entitled, that they had the right to do this. If you watched them on television, I watched the whole thing from the beginning to the end on television, from 1 o'clock in the afternoon straight through to the end till 3 o'clock in the morning. I watched the entire length of the broadcast because I want to. I watched as the Congress and the Senate came back to work, and I watched as they finished off. They didn't finish till almost 4 o'clock in the morning, but I was with them from 1 o'clock straight till 4 o'clock, and watching the entire thing. The thing that struck me, one of the things that struck me was that the people who walked in felt entitled. They felt that they had the right to do this. Look, they were so entitled and so comfortable in what they were doing that some of them didn't even take off their work identifications badges. They were wearing their lanyards with their work identification badge because they weren't scared of being caught, and they weren't scared of people knowing who they were because they felt they had every right to be doing what they were doing. And that is a result of the government not taking action in the summer against Antifa and BLM as they were looting and destroying businesses across America. That's a direct result of that. And that's the sad part, is that the moral fabric of America has been ripped to a point where people feel that they're just entitled to walk into the houses of legislature and put the lives of everybody at risk in the House of Legislature. They just feel like they're entitled. And
It boggles the mind.
It's really the beginning of the end of the American Empire. Because if you think about the Roman Empire and how the Roman Empire fell, it was due to the same thing. They killed Caesar. The Senate killed Caesar. Senators killed Caesar. They stabbed him on the stairs of the Senate. And then Caesar's son took over, and then there was an eternal civil war, and that pretty much destroyed the empire, right? It was a power struggle that destroyed the empire. We're going to start seeing the same thing happening in the States, and it's very scary because we're the closest neighbors.
I'm really worried also, like, what's going to happen when Joe Biden gets inaugurated. I'm wondering what type of protests and possible violence are going to be, and will the National Guard and all aspects of law enforcement be prepared? Because obviously these demonstrations that happened in the Capitol building on Wednesday, the police were completely overpowered.
Look, we have to understand that the American people have the right to protest.
Absolutely.
They have the right. The First Amendment gives them the right to protest, the right to assemble, and the right to express their opinion. And any democracy should be welcoming protests in the street. If people disagree with their government or disagree with some policy of their government, they should have the right to protest it in a legal, peaceful way.
Yes.
So if on the day of the inauguration there are legal, peaceful protests, I have no objections to that whatsoever.
Neither do I.
If there are violent protests, then I have an objection to it. Because political speech and political protest should never be violent, Sheldon.
Yes,
violence
exactly. They should never be violent.
Violence should never enter the political realm. Politics is the discussion of ideas and the debate of ideas. And sometimes I agree with you, sometimes I disagree with you. We take a vote. People who agree with me will win the vote. We don't win the vote. We don't win the vote. And life goes on. Politics is about talking and about negotiating. It's not about killing each other and stabbing each other and shooting each other and fighting each other. That's not part of politics, and that should never be part of politics.
At least not in this part of the world. I know other countries it is based on violence.
Not in democracies. In democracies, violence does not fit into the political spectrum.
Yeah. And now, like you said, these people were entitled. They were wearing their lanyards and they were going, and they did not care. They did not care. And it was a shame that American democracy was really put to the test. And, what could happen? It could happen there, could happen anywhere around the world in democratic countries.
Look, Ryan Morrow was on with me last hour, and he says expect violent protests across the country in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, I say for sure. There's no doubt about it. I think probably till at least, and I'm emphasizing the words at least, until February.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying at least. Now it could go to March, April, I don't know. We don't know for sure. We don't have a crystal ball that we could actually take a look and see what's going on. But when you take a look at, people will still refuse to accept the fact that Biden got elected and was sworn in.
Do you
And,
think that
and, and
all the violence is going to be from the right wing, from the pro-Trump?
it's going to be from. I think
I
it's going to
think
be
it's going to be from both
all
sides.
sides. All sides. Not even a
I
question.
think both sides are going to.
Yeah.
Going to
Yeah.
vote
Not
for it.
even a question. Right wing, left wing.
I don't think
Oh
it
no, no.
matters.
That has nothing to do with it. It's just people feeling that they're entitled, and if they're that dead set against, and if they really want to feel entitled, that's what they're going to do. That's why I said it doesn't make a difference if they're Democratic or Republican. So the thing is that most people will go by the rule of democracy. I mean, if you take a look at most Democrats, most Republicans, they respected the election, and even some very big Trump supporters, they respected the election. They respected Joe Biden.
Anybody who respects democracy respects the election.
Yeah, exactly.
Look,
and that's the way. And that's the way it
were
should
there
be.
was there problems with the election? Yes.
Of course there are.
Was the election 100% accurate? No, but
Never
no
is.
election ever is.
Yeah.
I've worked plenty of elections where, you have a ballot and you're looking at the ballot. Do I accept the ballot? Don't I accept the ballot? And it's really a fine line between yes and no. And sometimes you reject it, sometimes you accept it. I mean, that's part of elections.
Yep.
And sometimes things are miscounted, sometimes things are misplaced. I mean, it's a big election. 50 states are doing election. You're talking tens of millions, hundreds of millions of ballots.
Absolutely.
So were there problems? Of course there were problems. Were there enough problems to say that the election was stolen from one candidate to the other? Probably not more than any other election. I can't imagine there were more problems during this election than any other election in the history of America. So, okay. So Donald Trump was, he was a sore loser. He didn't like the fact that he lost the election. He was, he was a little bit of a baby about it. That's fine. I mean, he's entitled to. But you're only entitled to a certain point. After a certain point, if you push the envelope after a certain point, you're not entitled to that anymore. That's not yours anymore. So when you talk about sending people to the now let me back up for a second here, because it's very important to understand how the media plays into this too. The media is not the innocent bystander that media should be. The media helps hype the tension, helps hype the rhetoric, and helps radicalize people. It really does. When Trump got up at his speech, and I watched his speech as he was giving the speech in Washington on Wednesday, and near the end of the speech, he says, "All right, now let's march to the Capitol building. Let's have a peaceful march." That was the next sentence. Let's have a peaceful march, and let's stand peacefully at the Capitol building. He said peacefully twice. But it's a clip you'll never see because the media cuts it out. Because it's not inflammatory, and it won't get eyeballs to the media, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you take a look at the people who marched from where they were originally staging to the Capitol building, the majority of the people, even the people standing on the steps of the Capitol building, were very peaceful. They were standing there, they're taking selfies, they were carrying flags, they were just kind of milling around. There was no violence, nobody tried to burn the building down. I mean, it was a very, very peaceful protest, unlike the BLM protests that we saw over the summer. These were very, very peaceful protests. And when you look at the people who broke into the building, they were an armed militia. They had a plan. This was not a spontaneous attack on the houses of Congress. They had a plan. They came with weapons. They came with an idea. They came with shields. They came prepared to do what they were doing. This was a mission. This was not a spontaneous reaction to Trump's speech. So anyone trying to sell the idea that Trump incited these people to go and do this is out of their mind. These people came ready to do this. And
well, it's always the case that there's always a bunch of rotten apples in anything, and those rotten apples obviously got the media's attention, and they succeeded.
What amazes me, Sheldon, is that all summer we were hearing, "Oh, BLM isn't a violent organization. It's just a handful of people." The majority of the BLM protests were mostly peaceful protests. The mantra we heard all summer. But when we take a look at this protest, this Trump protest that happened on Wednesday, nobody's saying that this was mostly peaceful protest. Although you had 100,000 people in the streets, and only 200 or 150 or 200, maybe 300 people went into the Congress. But what about the other 173,000 people or 178,000 people that were standing in the street? What about them?
Mm-hmm.
They were peaceful. They all left. The police said, go home. They all went home. So, 1 second.
But
Why?
yeah, but you know the way.
I don't
Look,
understand the hypocrisy here.
You and I have been in the business for a long time, and you and I have seen that's exactly what the media preys on. And that's and is that right? Of course it's not right. That they should take a look at the big picture, that everything they should have encompassed the entire demonstration. People were marching peacefully to the Capitol building. You would take wide angles and everything, and even interview maybe a few people on the street, and focus in on the entire picture. The problem is with the media, they never focus in on the entire picture. And they want to get their bites. That's the thing. It's bites, Howie, and it's ratings. So the bites that they were getting were that small percentage of people that carried weapons that went into the Capitol building.
So it always reminds me,
it wasn't the bites of the peaceful protesters.
It always
was
reminds
the bites
me
of the thugs.
It always reminds me of, we'll take a more local look at this. Whenever you had the pro-Israel rally, and then you had a group of Hasidim protesting the pro-Israel rally, the main story would always be about those guys. It would never be about the 10,000 people who were rallying peacefully for Israel and singing songs. It would be about the 5 idiots standing there yelling Israel's an apartheid state.
Well, yeah, because they want ratings. They want those clips. They want the controversy. They want the drama. They want the struggles. They want their ratings. They want their clips. See, that's years ago. And also, this was even before social media. The media was never like this. But now with social media, with cell phones, with this, with that, I mean, now everybody's under the microscope. And now media is preying on this. And they're taking these thugs and they're putting it on the 6 o'clock news. Should they do it? Of course they don't do it, but they do it for one reason. Capital R ending with S, ratings.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And that's wrong, and that makes media irresponsible. Because when you and I first got into this profession of journalism, which was way before social media, as we both know.
Yeah, we're all.
It was about getting both sides, or 2 or 3 sides, or as many sides of the octagon as possible, putting it out there, and for the public to make their own decisions. And now with social media, now with all this stuff, and now with these clips, and now with cell phones, and now with this and that, they're making decisions for us. And they're trying to brainwash us and saying, well, instead of these hundreds of thousands of people that were marching peacefully, same thing with the George Floyd demonstration, same thing with the Capitol building or anything else, they decided, no, this is not enough ratings. We're not going to get people that want to watch this. We want controversy. We want numbers. We want ratings. We want to get these thugs. And maybe in a way, the media was hoping that this was going to happen because they would get better ratings.
I would go even farther in saying that the media orchestrated part of it, or at least the ideology that led to part of it.
Well, if you take a look also at social media, what they decided to do is they decided to play their own form of politics and to censor President Trump
and other conservative groups.
And the thing is that going to help alleviate the demonstrations? No. If anything, that could even incite even more, because then they could say they're cutting off free speech.
They are cutting off free speech.
No, but that's what they're saying.
You can't just say it. That's what's happening. They're cutting off free speech.
So
they're
like
censoring
Twitter,
people.
Facebook, all these other social media. That's exactly what they're doing, and they're cutting Trump's thing. The right for him to have free speech. And this is exactly, and they're going to get people even more riled up. So what are you supposed to do? This is not the answer. This is, for some people, they say it's great because he was inciting riots. For other people, they're saying, no, he has the right to say free speech, and it's going to make matters worse.
Well, it is going to make matters worse because
And the thing is, it is going to make
it's going
matters
to
worse.
drive
And,
the radicals underground, and that's really what we're looking at. So,
yeah, so that's what scares everybody. Like, what's exactly going to happen when Biden gets elected? What's going to happen in elections after? Is this going to influence Trump, let's say, in running in future elections? Will people remember what he did? Will people not forget what he did? Will people remember?
One second. When you say what he did,
was
are
a
you,
good.
are you talking about how great of a president he was? How
Yeah,
unemployment was at the lowest in history for
some people
blacks
will
and
say.
Hispanics? How the
Well, some
economy
people.
was booming? How
Well, some people love him as a president.
so
Obviously he's very
what are we talking
popular.
about? What he did? Are we talking about?
Yeah, but I'm saying no. But this is what I'm trying to say. I'm
Yeah.
saying people will love him because of certain things that he has done. People will love him what he did for Israel. People will love him for countries to be on board to make peace agreements with Israel. Or will people? It depends on which side you're on. Will people appreciate what he did? Will people not appreciate what he did? Will he run? Do you think he would? Do you think he would run? If you were Trump, would you try to run in the next election?
It'll depend on what the mood of the country was in 4 years.
I mean that's the thing. Like, will he do it? Will he be left a very sour taste in his mouth? I mean, and let's remember one thing. We said it before, Howie. No matter which scope of the political spectrum it may be civic, may be provincial, federal, state politics, or whatever, you're always under the gun, no matter who runs. You're always, if you have one, they'll try to find any skeletons in your closet. That's what media will try to do. And unfortunately,
unless your name is Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Kamala Harris.
Well, the thing is, like I always said, Howie, media has to treat everybody equally.
But they don't. But they don't.
And I know they don't. I know. I agree with you. They don't. I mean, but they should.
But they don't.
But obviously they don't. And the thing is, that's another thing for media. You can't take a side on the political spectrum. You have to treat all sides equally. And you have to ask the hard questions when it comes time to ask the hard questions.
But
when
they
you're
don't,
interviewing
Sheldon. They
but
don't.
I know they don't. I mean, it's something that I already know, and we both have talked about it, and we both agreed to it. And obviously, that's not right. And will that change? God knows. It probably won't change for many, many, many years. I think way after you and I leave this earth, if anything, if the media will ever change, because now media is about one word. It's called sensationalism. And they just
the Jerry Springer effect.
Yeah, and it's really, and you and I never, when we were first came into the media circle, this never happened. At least not to the degree that it's happening now. Like now, it's worse with social media, with all the technology that's available now. It's worse now than it's ever been, and social media has amplified the effect big time.
Look, it's really funny. A few years ago, I published a story in Montreal Jewish News about a high school laying off a ton of teachers. Sorry, and the headline of the article was "Bloodbath at a certain school," and the bloodbath was the basically beheading of all these teachers. Right? They were all, I think it was 60 teachers that were fired at the time or something. It was a huge school. I mean, it was the largest layoff of teachers in that school board's history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I called it a bloodbath. And the crap I got for using the word bloodbath in that article was you can't imagine how much crap I got for using the word bloodbath, right? Oh, you're being sensationalist. Today, if I didn't use the word bloodbath in an article like that, I would get crap for not using the word. The editor,
well, even the media themselves have been victims of bloodbaths.
Yeah,
many people that have lost their jobs.
But what I'm saying is that
us included.
What I'm saying is, if I wrote the same story today and I did not use the word bloodbath or something similar, a synonym to that, something sensational like that, I would get crap for not using a sensational word because I'm not trying to get more eyeballs into the newspaper.
Yeah.
So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't in today's world.
Yep. it's a very scary process when you take a look at what's going on, and again, the word unprecedented, and
Yeah,
people,
that's very overused, that word.
yeah, people are just doing things that you and I would have never thought in a million years we'd ever see, we'd ever experience, we'd ever, even our own backyard, having curfews. We'd never think, you would see countries around the world that use curfews because of military clashes with the government at all times, and widespread thuggery demonstrations and all this stuff. And you would see things like normally, like let's say in China or certain countries in South America, that you would see these curfews all very, very often. And now in our own backyard, talking on our own backyard, which is a very peaceful place, and now we can't even go out after 8 p.m. at night. Like it's, and you even walk during the day in some of the streets, so you don't see half the traffic like you do, because most people are either working from home, or a lot of people have lost their jobs. Even the buses that pass by, and I would take walks over the last couple of days, I would see buses half empty during the height of the rush hour. Like 8 o'clock in the morning, you would usually see buses.
Everything's closed. Schools are closed. Offices are closed. So
you would see metro stations, people walking in and out of metro stations, like subway stations, like you wouldn't believe. People walking on the streets, the hustle and bustle of the cars going by, and now you hardly see anything. And now at 8 o'clock at night, it's a ghost town. It's unbelievable when you see these things, and you're wondering, well, what's next? And then my next question is, how good is this curfew going to wind up being? Is this going to help? Is this going to be the same? No, I'm saying to the people out there. I mean, I think you and I both know it's not going to help. And the thing is also at the same time, and I've gotten a lot of flack from many people, and also because my significant other is a teacher, you're a teacher, and I have other people that I know are teachers. And it's like, I understand that parents need to work, and they have to send their kids to school. I understand for their mental stability and having friends, but at the same time, you can't throw them to the wolves and use them as guinea pigs, and use the teachers and school administrators as a guinea pig, because they could wind up getting it, and they could shut the schools down, not for a week, not for 2 weeks, not for a month. They could shut it down for a whole year. They've already canceled provincial final exams in this neck of the woods, in this region,
for the second year in a row.
Then also the province of Ontario is not opening up schools till at least January, the end of January at least, and God knows how long. And they've been going up and up. And then the thing is, what's going to happen when the high school kids go back, and what's going to happen? You're going back to school tomorrow.
Yes.
So the thing is, then what's going to happen? Are there going to be more students infected? And the thing is, what kills me is, so many people did go out. They did celebrate Hanukkah. They did celebrate Christmas. They did celebrate New Year's. I know you and I have stayed in our respective homes that we kept very close to home, for the exception of seeing my significant other, who's in my family bubble, which I am permitted to see. I mean, other than that, there were people. Police were breaking up parties all over Canada. And people thought that this was a joke. So now more people got sick. And now, as they always said, as we remember when we were students in school, if you and I never disrupted the teachers or class, but other people would, we'd all get punished. So it's always the question that of a few rotten apples, you and I are getting punished.
Of course.
And you and I didn't do anything wrong. You and I have done everything. You and I have listened, and other people haven't. And because the other people haven't listened, we're all in lockdown. We now have a curfew, thanks a bunch to the people who didn't listen.
We're lucky the government didn't give us a lights out time.
You're not kidding, and I'm
you
also
must
lucky
be home by 8 o'clock.
Haven't gone into our buildings.
You must be home by 8 o'clock. Lights out by 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's almost like it's like being in jail.
It's like being 15 again, Sheldon. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's and then you say to yourself, and then you're going like, what is this? Like what? Like the government's begged people, keep your social distancing. I mean, look, I take a walk. If I see people coming towards me, I'll go either across the street or I'll go into a driveway or something, wait for the other people to pass me if it's two people or more, and then I go and then I go and walk. And I still go outside and I still wear a mask anyway. And it's hard like heck to breathe and walk at the same time. And then if somebody calls you at the same time, and then you're wearing a scarf and you're wearing a chook and you're wearing a hood, and it's like you're I'm coming back in my place. I'm huffing and puffing like an old horse.
You're an old horse.
Thanks. And the and the thing is, it's like, you take a look and you're going like, what did I do? I listen to the government. You listen to the government. We're punished.
But thank
We're
God.
like kids being punished.
But Sheldon, we listen to the government, but thank God neither one of us has gotten COVID.
Yeah. But you and I did the smart things. We kept our social distancing. We're watching ourselves. We frequently hand wash. And you know what the real laugh about it, the whole thing? I mean, you and I were brought up, and many people that I know that are listening to the show are brought up. When you come in from the outdoors, you always wash your hands anyway. Yeah. You wash your hands when you're having supper. If you're handling mail or if you're handling other stuff, before you touch food, you wash your hands. It's like people have to be re-educated. Some people have to be re-educated to wash their hands. Here's another story too, that when you talk about elementary school students, let's say, or high school students. Now, let's say CJEP and university students, for the most part, I would think they would be more responsible to wash their hands. Okay. Let's face it, a lot of elementary schools students, especially the young students, let's face facts. They don't wash their hands. Very few will wash their hands on a continuous basis, as the parents will try to encourage them to wash their hands. Well, a lot of them do that, or they forget, or whatever the case is, or they think, oh, no, forget it, whatever. What do you think is going to happen to high school students? You think every single high school, or the majority of the high school students, are actually going to wash their hands, Howie?
No.
Maybe the later part, secondary 4, 5, grade 10, grade 11,
even then,
grade 12 in Ontario.
Even then.
So they're not going to wash their hands, or they're going to come back, or their nose is going to be running, and they're going to, let's say, go like that on their nose, or they forget with the mask, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what do you think? So like people don't realize, teachers know and scared out of their minds of, if somebody accidentally touches them, whatever, or they touch a doorknob, or they touch a handle or something like that.
Funny, I don't have that.
I know that you wash your hands.
I don't have that phobia.
No, but I'm saying like teachers will wash their hands.
But I'm telling you, I don't have the phobia that if I touch someone or somebody touches me, that I'm going to catch COVID. I understand how.
I know.
I understand how airborne diseases work, and so the phobia of touching something and then touching my face, the chance of me getting it from that is minimal. I have more of a chance of getting it if you come over and sneeze on me.
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's be honest, right?
Yeah, but I know like teachers will safeguard themselves, and I know that province is trying to. I'm not sure about your school, but I supplying hand sanitizers. I think now is starting on Monday for the high schools. So they're supposed to equip teachers with extra masks and students with extra masks. And now grade 5 and grade 6 are now obliged to wear masks in the elementary school system. So they're going to have to start. They're going to have to start wearing masks. But the thing is, it's more to it than just the mask. It's the hand washing, and most important thing, social distancing.
Yeah, the masks aren't really effective, but the hand washing and social distancing is.
Yeah, that's what you have to do, and it's like it. And people put too much emphasis on masks, although it is important. It's not the be end and end all solution.
No,
it's a combination of a lot of things to remain safe, and that's the big picture that I want people to take that home with. It's not masks are the only solution to this entire thing. It's social distancing, it's hand washing, and and you have to be careful of who you come in contact with. And please don't go to the big parties, and refrain from that.
Until this whole thing is solved.
Yeah. And yes, and I know, look, it's going to take a long time for the vaccines to be, for you and I to get the vaccines. It's going to take till at least, they're saying till September, October of this year.
And then there's another month between then and the second dose of the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking basically practically the full year,
Yeah.
if not the full year, we're going to be pretty much in the same situation. And the thing is, which is even going to be harder, when when COVID first started, it was ending winter going into spring. So the weather was already starting to get better. Now the weather's getting colder, and now people are staying in more. Well, now the curfew is not helping things besides everything else.
Right.
Now it's going to be a very long winter.
True.
So that's another thing that we're going to be faced with, and I think that the second thing is, and the big key thing is what's going to happen is, as the schools are starting to open up now, we're going to start seeing if there's going to be an increase or decrease, and if the curfew in the government's eyes is actually doing anything. And I agree with you. I don't think
you're only going to see the results of that in 14 days, and in 14
exactly.
days the curfew's over. So
so I have a funny feeling they're going to extend the curfew.
Yeah.
And then, do you think that the school? Okay, so let me ask you this: as a teacher, do you think that the schools will be further shut?
I would venture to guess yes.
Okay.
I would venture to guess that they're going to open up now, and we'll probably be open for a week or two and then shut down again. That's my guess.
Because if it's going to go up higher, because I think at one point this neck of the woods went to over 3,000 people that got infected. So the thing is, now that people are now going back to school, the elementary school, the high schools are starting as of the elementary schools rather is starting on the 11th, and the high schools are starting on the 18th. It's going to be interesting to find out what the first week of schools what's going to happen, and then after that the high schools, and then we'll see what happened. Because I really thought, honestly,
I hope nothing. I hope that the kids could go to school.
I hope so too. I mean, most people, 95% of the people would want, not, what am I saying, 95? 99.99% would like things to be back to normal. People to go back to school, people to get back to work, people to be able to go out, get together with friends and family. And now it's and it would be good for everybody's well-being. And so many people have been severely depressed on this whole situation, and especially the people that are living alone. It's such a tragedy, and I only hope things are going to get better. We can only pray that things will get back to normal, and hopefully by next year. And that's all we can hope for right now.
Amen. Or as that congressman said, amen and a woman.
Yes.
The most ridiculous thing ever said in Congress. Yeah. Sheldon, we're all out of time.
Yeah, it's been a really tough. It's been a very tough. And I was actually reflecting. I'll say this in closing. I was when I was celebrating New Year's with my significant other, and we were just saying, and we said to each other, we asked each other, what would we want for New Year's? I said, our health and things to get back to normal for everybody.
I wish that upon you and everybody listening.
Yeah, and I wish that for you. I wish that to everybody. And also, on a different note entirely, I want to take this time to thank you for, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show when I was on, that my Inside the Vault Classic Rock and Oldies show is going to be starting as of tomorrow evening.
Yes, and I have to tell you, the Apple app is now working, so you could download. Excellent. You can download the Apple app from the iTunes store.
Yeah. So if you like classic rock, you like oldies, tomorrow evening at 7 to 9, Monday to Friday. And if you miss it live on Monday evening, you will hear it on the replay Tuesday to Friday. And hope to have everybody on board. So, and I want to thank you for allowing me, and for people who just want to say this, that you, Howie, have asked me for months, if not over a year, to come over. And I know I was busy with other radio projects, and it was practically impossible. I had absolutely no, I had no room at all on my schedule. And you know what? I feel like I'm coming back home, because I've been with you now for 7 years, over 7 years. And you and I have been on the show. We've been laughing and a lot, and being together at the old Radio Shalom, and now online here. And I feel like I'm coming back home. And of course, I've done entertainment reports like you've done your interviews at Just for Laughs, which I hope somehow, some way, somehow we will have a festival back on this summer. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I think it's not going to happen, but there's nothing wrong with hoping that it's going to happen. That we'll be live and being a part of a wonderful experience. And also, like, I'm back home now doing my musical show on True Talk Radio. So I think it's wonderful. So I hope everybody will tune in, and I hope everybody will have a blast listening.
All right, and I'll be back again on Tuesday night for Political Hitman right here on the True Talk Radio Network. We'll see you
Take care.
again. We'll see you again next week.